Dave McNally attended Billings Central High School in Billings, and although he knew and experienced discipline from the sisters at that Catholic institution, he was hardly a choir boy. He and some of his teammates engaged in hijinks on several occasions. One of the more memorable times, and I'm calling it the Shenanigans at the ballpark, occurred 60 years ago this summer in at Cobb Field. This story comes from a book called Coach, Baseball in Life, Eddie Bain Style, which came out in 2015, put together by people who had played for Eddie Bain, the legendary Legion Post 4 and Billings Royals coach, over the years. This was 6 or 7 years after Bain passed away. On the night in question, the Billings Mustangs were playing a Pioneer League game at Cobb Field, and several Legion Post 4 players had come to the game. They were spectators sitting in the first base stands. As Ed Bain Jr., son of the coach, described it in the book, suddenly there was a loud bang from under the grandstand in the men's restroom. Dave and his best friend, both in high school and on the Legion team, Bill McIntosh, and a couple other boys had been away from their seats. They soon came running up the stairs, and that aroused the suspicion, caught the attention of Blackie Johnson, a Billings police officer, Legion booster, and friend of Coach Bain. He was seated over in the third base stand. You have to remember that back in those days in Billings and many other American cities, it was not uncommon for police officers to take a benign interest monitoring young people, especially boys in their town, to keep them as much as possible out of trouble. So Blackie Johnson ran over to where the Legion players were seated on the first base line, and I guess he knew from previous events that Dave and McIntosh were the likely culprits, the obvious ringleaders. He grabbed them and they spilled out what had happened. Here's the story. The restrooms in Cobb Field, which no longer stands, were below the stands. A man went into the restroom, and Dave and Bill McIntosh were waiting. They obviously were waiting for the right moments. The guy goes into the restroom, enters the stall, sits on the toilet, closes the doors, and sits on the toilet. They were waiting for the right moment. They rolled a cherry bomb under the stall door, and the bomb went off. As Ed Bain Jr. put it in the book, the man came roaring out of the stall, his pants down, the toilet paper in hand, and smoke all around. Now that he knew what had happened, Johnson told Bain Sr., and despite the fact that McIntosh and McNally were two stars on the team that would go to glory that summer, would go all the way to the Legion World Series in Hastings, Nebraska, and finish second in the nation, he didn't show any favoritism. He suspended the two culprits for the upcoming road trip to Sydney and Glendive.